you know what? Building my identity as a researcher, I think it's always been something in there. Once I started back and began my sort of art-based world again with my degree, that was the beginning of it. That's the start of it. You know, you're contacting people through email, you talk to other artists, you find out about them, what they do, and then you get an email, then you're contacting them. So it's putting those little feelers out there, and then drawing people into your mad world that you've got.
It started right from when I came here to do my master's. You know, I came here and from a foreign country, Nigeria, my first time coming to the UK. Educational system was totally different from, the way. So everything I've learned in research was from this university. And I observed that, I was always happy. People said I'm crazy. Those were my happy moments when I'm researching, looking for articles, looking for things to support what I'm writing. Those were my happiest moments. And also, we were taught how to make presentations in groups. Though my earlier work in Nigeria, because I'm a pharmacist by training, and I do lots of presentation to doctors, pharmacists concerning my products. So talking to the public has never been an issue for me. But the academic aspect of making presentations, those competencies were acquired.
My identity as a researcher has changed since I started the PhD. I think I'm much more ready to acknowledge now that I don't actually know very much. Well, first of all, I thought that I had to know everything. So then I thought that I had to convince people that I knew everything. Whereas now, actually, I've realised that it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that, or I'm going to find out the answer to that. I think having to maybe justify or qualify my answers or my opinions has actually been a really important learning process, because I've had to ask myself, why do I think that? I've had to convince other people. And the more you practice doing that, I think the more that gives you confidence that actually you do know more than you think. Or when I look back at some of the things that I wrote in the first few months, if I look at my original research proposal compared to the research proposal I have now, actually I can really see how my thinking and how my identity, how I write, has developed. And I think there are still elements of who I was a year ago, but just some things have tweaked or shifted. And I think that's really natural during the course of the PhD, that you will find that you lose some things, but also you gain or improve others.
So I think I have grown into the role of researcher, and I think it was something that I built myself. So to begin with, when I started this PhD journey, I identified solely as a PhD student. And very often when people ask me, what do you do at the university? I said, I'm a postgraduate student. And over the years, I started to come away from the term student and started to use the term researcher a bit more. And this is something that has come as I started to talk to people about their research and discussing my research. So it wasn't something that was always there. It was something that I built over the 3 years. The more I started to work with my research and with my data and speaking to people that are part of my research and their relatives. I think that came with those conversations and discussions that I've had over the 3 years.
My master's really helped me build that identity as a researcher. I did my Master of Research, so it had a lot of the backbone modules that you'd need to kind of build the skills that you're going to need in your PhD. But just a passion for the research anyway, I think definitely helps. It's a lot easier to learn those things, enjoy learning about them and then putting them into practice when you're passionate about just research as a whole.
I think I came in more or less like a researcher because I was still working with the research center during my undergraduate before I came to Derby. So I got the identity as an autism researcher. But when I first came here, I think I was more like, I'm still a student, I'm like undergraduate student. Then by now I realize I'm not an undergraduate student anymore and I have more responsibility to bear.
I think me viewing myself as a researcher, being a researcher, is still something that I am developing. It's not something that's happened already. It has started to happen, definitely, in many ways, that have started before I started my PhD and then throughout my PhD, but I wouldn't say I've finished that sort of identification process yet.
So I'm never really, I don't know if I feel like a researcher just yet. I did several small research projects and I've been a research assistant before I came into the PhD role, but I didn't feel like a researcher because I was the research assistant and I was always quite clear, even when people went, oh, but you are one of the researchers. No, I'm the research assistant. But in terms of my identity, I still feel very new, like I'm an early researcher, just finding their feet and learning the craft and trying to learn more and be better. So I'm hoping by the end I'm a better researcher.
At the beginning of my PhD, I didn't feel much like a researcher. I was just learning how to research. But as I've developed throughout the last 3.5 years, I've really got a taste for research and I've understood how to do it more efficiently. And now I've been writing a few papers and starting to get things published. And now I start to feel much more like a researcher, much more confident in that.
I've grown and developed into that role of researcher. Now moving on into the PhD, obviously I did my thesis for my master's, the MRes, and again I enjoyed that. But it obviously got to a deeper and bigger level. And going through the modules for the MRes, which are all really the philosophy and getting published about research, was just attuned to me. I did quite well in that, but I enjoyed all the modules. So from that, I developed into a researcher. At the beginning of the process, I wouldn't have identified myself as a researcher, but as I've enjoyed it so much, and now I'm collecting data and analysing it, I'm beginning to see myself as a researcher. Before, I was seeing myself as a PhD student, and I didn't really understand what that meant. Now I'm beginning to see myself as a researcher.